Good afternoon. What time is it now? It's 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock football Sunday.
Yeah, someone said it was a bad day to do a live stream because there's football on, which I'm Canadian, so we don't really watch all that much football. At least the CFL is nowhere near like the NFL. But I said this is the type. Watching football is the type of thing you can, multitask and listen to this in the sidebar. Okay, while we wait for everyone to come in, because I know there's people here, and I'm just going to look at the live icon to tell us how many people are watching. We'll wait for people to stream in. Everyone knows the topics for the day. Everyone knows who Nate Broady is.
Hey.
Nate, how you doing?
Hey, everybody.
If anybody doesn't know who Nate Broady is, watch the first live stream. You will know everything you've ever wanted to know about Nate, which will explain who he is, how he got to where he is. It's an amazing story. Nate, just so you know, my father watched that entire live stream and said it was amazing.
Oh, wow.
He said it was. He said the story was amazing. It was like it was touching, endearing, and absolutely a phenomenal story. So whoever has not seen that live stream, go check it out.
I appreciate it. Oh, that's nice, man.
No, it was good. It was good. I mean, it was eye opening. A few people were saying that they wanted us to get to the law, but like you can't hear someone's life story like that and jump right into the law. The law will always be there, so we can get there.
Oh yeah.
Prefacing this by saying that this is a live stream. If anybody doesn't like the live stream format, you may not like this format, but this is the type of discussion I think that for the subject matter that we're dealing with, it needs to be live. I think it needs to be nuanced, and we need to answer questions that people have, do it in real time. And I have as many questions, and I think everyone else has it. So we'll see who's got what questions. If you have questions, post them in the comment section there, and we read them as we go along.
Awesome.
One thing before we get into it, we are talking about the Kate Steinle case, and there are two facets to this entire situation. There's the legal and there's the political. There's the issue of sanctuary cities. There's the issue of borders. There's the issue of sanctuary city laws. That's the political / legal side to it. Then there's the pure legal, which is what happened in this trial. How did it happen? Let's get an understanding of it, because a lot of people are understandably confused and outraged and don't understand how we got to this situation. When I say that the distinction is there, it's because illegal immigrant or American citizen, the criminal law principles that were applied would be the same regardless.
Correct.
So we don't need to get into the political side. There's enough people doing that, and this case has been used for that. But when I heard what happened, I just needed to understand. And Nate, give people a let's do a 30-second intro as to who you are, just in case they haven't seen the original live stream.
All right, my name is Nate Broady. I'm a former prosecutor, former cop, and former law professor. So what my life story, if you watch the live stream, you'll see my life story. But now I'm turning to YouTube, and I'm going to be doing videos. And what I do is just pick out topics. Like I'll be talking about the Tekashi 6ix9ine. He's a gang member for the Blood Street gang who was just convicted and flipped on all his partners. So I'm doing so I'm going to be breaking down that case, and that's what I do. I usually just break down cases, and then I do reaction and stuff because I'm a big nerd. So like next week I'm going to be at Comic-Con doing reaction, live streaming from Comic-Con. So it's going to be great. And me and my daughter go every year, and it's funny because now my little one who's 3 wants to go, but she's too little to go to Comic-Con because she's never going to have a good time.
Well,
so.
it would be like a live version of Disneyland to some extent.
Yeah. Except there's no rides though. So.
Where is Comic-Con? It's in California?
Well, this Comic-Con is in New York. This is New York City Comic-Con. We go every year, so.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
There was something you said that I was going to jump in on. Oh, yes. Not that everyone should go and jump to Nate's channel just because I suggest. It's great content. I'm subscribed. When he gets to 1,000 subscribers, I'll be able to actually tag him in the community tab. I was noticing, not only could I not tag Nate because I think you need to be at 1,000 subs.
Yeah, you got to be at 1,000 subs.
So. Anyways, but check out Nate's stuff. It's good. It's great stuff, and it's very insightful, and you'll learn a lot. I mean, you will learn a lot. It's Nate is up and coming, just discovering this YouTube thing. So, and all that I know is that I learn a lot from Nate, and now he is I have 3 go-to lawyers in the States when I have a question, and Nate's one of them.
Oh, I appreciate that.
You may regret it because I can have a lot of questions, but
no. Well, it's funny because I like right now I have a lot of students who still come to me because I've taught some law school classes from the first year classes. So I have all the material. So right now I've been like trying to produce the material and just put it here for free, like put it on my channel for free. So you'll start seeing like contract stuff, criminal law stuff, all the stuff that you're going to be talking about, but just the nuance. And it's tough because it's so much material. But I think I can. It's hard to take a semester's worth of material and make it into like a 30-minute video. You know what I mean? So it's
Very cool. Okay, now I think if everybody who is here now can tweet this out or share it somewhere so that people know we're live, because some people are saying that they got the notice, but it's not indicating on YouTube that it's live.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking at it
if
now,
anybody hears some noises, some bizarre noises, growling, barking in the background, it's probably my dogs. And if you see me looking to the side, it's just to make sure one of the dogs has now crawled behind the couch. And if she can't get out, I may have to go and get her.
Oh no.
Okay, so we should get this started.
Whenever you're ready, should I just give some background? How do you want to do? You want to start with Kate Steinle or YouTube first? It seems like you want to start with Kate
Steinle, because I think let's actually start with YouTube.
Okay.
I think there might be less to discuss on that, although people who are not aware of it are going to be learning something.
Sure.
So let's start with YouTube and the $170 million fine issued against them by the
FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and New York State gets a piece of that too. They get I think the FTC gets 136 million and New York State gets 34 million.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of this. If anybody doesn't know what's going on, Nate, you give them the 411.
All right. So this all starts with a law called COPPA. COPPA stands for the Child Online Protection Act. Now, it's passed in 2013, and what it was intended to do, it was intended to protect children's privacy here online. And the way they did it was that platforms like YouTube can't collect data on children under the age of 13 without their express parental consent. Now, to protect platforms, this regulation says that platforms must have actual knowledge that the content that they're directing is toward children. So so where you have a creator like myself, if I have child-directed content and then tell YouTube that content is directed toward children, then YouTube is responsible for not collecting data on that content. Or if a representative of YouTube looks at my content and says, well, hey, that's content for children under 13, then YouTube can't collect data on that content. When I mean data, I mean, likes, comments, any of that aggregate data that it uses for advertising. So what happens is the government found out that YouTube was collecting data on this particular content. So YouTube was trying to say, well, we didn't know it was child content. But when you read the complaint, the first thing the government said was, well, channels like, I don't know if you've done this when you give your kid like an iPad and they watch like the Mother Goose Club. Well, the government said, well, the Mother Goose Club is content for children under the age of 13, and it's promoted as content. The creators of that channel have told YouTube, and it's in the description that this is for children. Ryan's Toys, for instance, is a 5-year-old playing with toys. That's not for adults, that's for children. So YouTube knew that content was for children. And then YouTube Kids was the platform where they would take content off the platform and put it on YouTube Kids, so only kids can use that content. And that content was sometimes manually reviewed by people at YouTube to say, okay, this channel like Ryan's Toys would be put on YouTube Kids because it would say this was good for kids. So now the government said, well, YouTube had actual knowledge that this content was for children. And what YouTube was doing was that through directed advertisement. Now, I don't know if everybody understands, traditional advertisement went that you watch, let's say, a football game. And if you notice for American football games, you always see car commercials and beer commercials, right? Because men, we like cars and we like beer. So it's directed at the entire audience, trying to generalize. But YouTube was able to do it based on an individual. So what the things that I particularly like, they can show me ads. So in other words, if I don't like beer, they can show me wine ads, or they can show me ads for, like this wonderful microphone, things that I'm interested in. They can directly show me those things that I'm directly interested in. And that was more valuable to these advertisers. Advertisers said, yeah, I'd rather you show my ads to people who are interested in my product rather than just showing it to an aggregate group. So most creators are getting you get a lot more money for those targeted ads. But when YouTube started getting that information from the child source material, they were violating the law because they were collecting data on children who are under 13, and then they would go to a toy company, let's say Legos. I think Davies used Legos. You go to the Lego company and say, hey, I have a lot of people here watching this Lego content. I'm going to show this Lego content to this particular user who likes Legos, and that happened to be a child. So that's where YouTube got banged on. I don't know. Did I explain that well, or
I think the if you, I don't, can you everyone hear a dog making noise in the background now? All right,
don't worry.
I may have to duck out in 30 seconds just to get whatever toy is stuck under the heater. That I think we have a similar law in Canada where you're not allowed directing ads specifically at children. And we sort of understand the principle that they're collecting behavioral patterns. But now, so the question I had, understanding the principle, is, give me one.
You can barely hear it. You can barely hear it.
If I can barely hear it, I'm going to leave her quiet because I'll get the toy when you're talking. Does YouTube not say that you can't use it if you're under 13 years old? Like as a platform, you can't have an account if you're under 13?
Yes, YouTube says you can't have an account if you're under the age of 13. But the government, but that doesn't matter because what the government does, it says we're not basing it on who actually owns the account, but we're actually basing it on the content. So if you have a video that's directed at children, no matter what account that is, it's the content that's directed at children that they're more concerned about, not the account. If the account says it's from a person who's 100 years old, that doesn't matter. It's the content itself. That's the problem.
This is where, I mean, not having been where the things were pleaded and raised the arguments, where I'm thinking when reading this is that, okay, fine. If they specifically say that children under 13 are not allowed having accounts, therefore anybody who has this account is an adult, is deemed to be an adult or has parental consent. And then they're not targeting children, but they're targeting the behavioral patterns of what can arguably be deemed to be accounts that are more targeting the parents' behavioral patterns for their children, with their children, as opposed to targeting the children and collecting data on children, as opposed to collecting data on parental accounts for children. So not knowing if any of this was argued, we know the outcome was...
Well, they settled because the law is pretty clear. It's about the content. If the content is targeted toward children, then that content, you can't collect data on that content. It's not about the individual, it's about the content itself. So Ryan's Toys, for instance, it's the content is a 5-year-old playing with toys. So YouTube and the government says, well, that content itself is targeted to children. Now, YouTube can say, I didn't know that content was directed to children, but based on the description of the channel and based on the fact that YouTube pulled it out and put it into YouTube Kids and still collected data, that was a huge problem because they couldn't avoid the fact that they knew that this particular content was directed at children, and they still collected data on it.
Okay, so they collect the data, they use it for targeted marketing.
Correct. To show children more children's ads. Like my daughters love the I forgot Bubba Guppies, so they would show a lot of Bubba Guppies commercials on my account.
and so now the kids then see. Well, I guess the idea is now the kids see this, then run off to their parents and say, "You need to buy me this because I was specifically brainwashed by a company that I need this toy." Okay, so they were deemed. So they settled. There was no. I don't know how does it work with the FTC? Would you have had a hearing in front of a tribunal?
Yeah. So what happens is the FTC sues them civilly. So we go into civil court and they'll say, you broke these particular, this rule. And this rule says that you can't, collect advertising data for children. YouTube didn't go to trial. YouTube said, all right, we're going to settle this because you caught us with our hand in a cookie jar. If you read the complaint, they got caught. So what happens is, YouTube settled and said, okay, we'll pay this fine and we're going to make massive changes to the platform. Now, those changes are going to affect every creator and it's going to affect and there's a 4-month waiting period and before YouTube has to actually implement all of this. And the 3 things that are going to change is that YouTube has to now, when you upload a video, and starting January 1st, 2020, when you upload a video, you're going to have to announce whether your video is for children or not. So before you upload, there's going to be like a dialog box going to come up and says, is this targeted for children or not? And you got to say yes or no. And if you lie as a creator, if you put up some content that's really directed to children, that YouTube or the government deems that really is, then the government can come after the creator for strict liability. That means they don't have to prove that you didn't intend to put up child content, you didn't intend to deceive the government, that just because you uploaded a video targeted to children and didn't and clicked the wrong box, then they can take you to court and make you pay a fine. And the FTC says starting in January, they're going to do a survey, and actually a survey here's the exact quote. They intend to do a sweep of the YouTube platform and determine if creators are doing this. And if they are going to come after them as individuals. So I saw that part where there was the FTC chairperson or whatever talking about how they can go after the barrel or the fish. Yes, and they're going after them both.
What are there going to be statutory penalties, or are there going to be civil damages, or is it how are they going to establish?
Yes, there are going to be civil damages where if you're strictly liable now for those of you know, because I know through strict liability is a concept here in the States in which it's a crime or it's a penalty in which the government doesn't have to prove the mens rea for any crime or any type of when you do due process in criminal court. You have two aspects. You got the mens rea, which is the mental state, and the actus reus, which is the act. For strict liability crimes or strict liability violations, you don't have to prove the mens rea. For instance, speeding would be a strict liability crime. If you go over the speed limit, you get a ticket. It doesn't matter what the reason was you're going over the speed limit. Sometimes you may I was doing something, but generally the intent doesn't matter. You can't say I didn't intend to go over the speed limit. And statutory rape is another instance where, it doesn't matter what your excuse was for having sex with the minor. If you do it, you're guilty. So the mens rea is removed from that. It's the act itself. And that's how they're going to treat this. Where if you upload child content and they deem it to be child content and you didn't tell them that it was, so they couldn't collect data, then they're going to fine you. And I think the fine is up to $17,000 per offense.
Ridiculous. Okay.
Yes, crazy.
Before we get into tempting fate, wants to know how they're going to determine if something is targeting children. Before that, let me open a parentheses on the strict liability. It was last week. I was in front of a municipal court contesting having entered an on-ramp during carpool hours. Mm-hmm. And there was the defense to the strict liability is inadequate signage is a defense. The judge took it under deliberation, which is already sort of amazing. So when I get the judgment on that, I'm going to make a vlog on my defense. But even in strict liability, you can reverse the presumption, but you have to, the burden is going to be a high burden of proof.
Yes.
There haven't been any principles fleshed out as to what is deemed to be targeting children and what is not. But do we have any idea?
Well, I think YouTube is going to have to. I think that's what this 4-month period is for. So YouTube can kind of get those standards to what it's going to deem to be appropriate for children. But and this is so scary because let's forget. Let's say like my channel. Like sometimes I do reactions, so I'll do a movie review and Finding Dory. Finding Dory is a kids movie. So if I do a movie review and they come and look at my video and says, well, that's targeted to children because you did a movie review of Finding Dory. Then I could be fined by the FTC and taken and dragged into court. So they haven't really explained what it means to be child content, but I think it's kind of that you know when you see it, like Ryan's Toys, the Mother Goose Club, all those other YouTube channels.
Stuff.
It's clear. But you're talking.
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but we're talking about people like me and you. We may do a story or something on something that children will be interested in, but will it be deemed child-directed content? That's the problem, and that's what everybody's more scared about, and obviously the financial implications.
Well, so let's get there. Actually, one of the, I guess for anybody who's remotely worried, one of the best things to do would just be to demonetize or to not enable monetization on any video if you have the slightest suspicion. Do we know how they got to $170 million for the fine? Was that like a reflection of, apparently that was 10 times the largest fine that the FTC had ever previously issued?
Yeah, it was the largest fine they've ever for this particular thing, 170 million, which is a lot of money. But it didn't go to the people who they actually violated. It went to the government.
That's the other thing. Who gets that? Who gets that 170 million? The government gets it.
The FTC, the FTC, and New York State. New York State got 30. A whole bunch of money.
Not that we want to do an audit of the government, but what are they going to do with that money? Do we have any idea?
I don't have any idea. I know they're probably screaming, "Yay! Yay!" It's a windfall for them.
Yeah, no, that's one heck of a windfall. I don't know. Do they pay tax on it?
To themselves, right? Well, New York State will probably have to pay tax to the federal government on their part. The federal government probably won't have to pay any tax.
That's ridiculous. And so now the monetization, because you sent me a link for a Daryl Eves video, which if anyone hasn't seen it, I don't know. We could probably post the link at some point. I always say I'm going to post links into these live streams and then never get around to it. I never get around to time stamping either. So if anybody wants to have a pinned comment, timestamp the important things, and booyah, that'll be a pinned comment. What was I just saying?
Well, no, we're talking about the monetization.
Oh, Daryl Eves. Yeah. So what are going to be the actual impacts monetization wise on those types of videos?
Well, understand this: directed ads that are directed toward the individual, where your individual tastes that are following you and finding out what you actually like. Those ads are so much more expensive than just the ads where I just on a football commercial, I'm just doing beer commercial for everybody playing football. So those directed ads, channels who are deemed to be child related or to be marketing to children, they're going to lose, they assume, about up to 85% of their ad revenue if they are deemed to be focusing on children, because the ads that are just the general basic ads that you put on every video are just so much less appealing that, a lot of these channels, these bigger channels, are looking at 85% of their income being lost through ad revenue because of this new rule.
Yeah, and so for anybody who doesn't really understand that or never thought about the monetization, there are two systems. There's like you pay just for the ad and run it anywhere, or there's the auction-based ad. And so some of these big companies, when they know that they can target someone specifically who would be most likely to open up the ad, they'll pay a substantial portion of money to be able to directly target that individual. What, from what I understand, is going to happen now is that companies like Lego are not going to be able to specifically target children's Lego channels because they're not going to have that data any longer. So it's going to be like sort of the generic splash all ads, which people pay much less for because they're not specifically targeted.
Correct. Not toward the individual, which makes sense, because if they sent me a beer ad, I'm more likely to look at it than if they sent it to my wife. She hates beer.
Well, and this is another thing. I don't know if I've been talking about my videos getting demonetized a lot or limited monetization, and everybody's saying that they're still seeing ads on them, and I see them occasionally too, and they seem to be the exact same ad, one of two ads. And people, if you can tell me if this is what you see also, the first one is some series and it starts off with someone pushing someone off a cliff in a Grand Canyon type setting, and then the other one is a series on another, it's not Netflix, it's on another series. I'm going to remember the name only later, but it's about like an alien invasion of an island, and it looks like it takes place in 17th century. So I think they have these like stock ads that they run on demonetized videos, and they're the ones who are willing to advertise even on potentially unfriendly content, although mine always turns friendly afterwards. But so that's that's interesting. So they've given a deadline for YouTube to, what do they have to do? They have to purge the system of all this data they have. How do they confirm that they are deleting this data that they've gathered illegally?
Well, I don't know if they have to delete the data that they already have, but the three things that supposedly came out is that the creators they're gonna have a system where creators, before you upload, you got to tell them this is for children or not for children. The second thing is that they're going to change the monetization, so now you're going to lose that revenue. And the last is going to be you're not going to be able to like those videos. You're not going to be able to comment on those videos, because YouTube's whole system has developed where if you like or comment on a video, that all is collected stuff, so collected data, so you're not going to be able to do that. So those videos are just going to be like, it's going to be more like TV now. Those videos are going to play and people are just going to watch, and that's really just going to be it. So it's really going to change the way YouTube handles that type of material.
Yeah, or they create a specific child platform, and then marketers, I guess, would know that they are marketing on a children's platform, but wouldn't be able to get the behaviorally specific targeting, and there might be a middle ground as to how much they pay between prime dollar for targeted ads versus pennies on the dollar for generalized ads. Cardozo Media asked, "Am I is it Oh, I forgot this function. Look how cool this is.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Booyah! Is it demonetized, or are they running limited ads? Well, so apparently there's only two icons. There's green and there's yellow. Green being monetized and yellow being demonetized or limited ads. And then apparently, from what we learned with Jörg Sprave on the last live stream, even if it's got the green icon, if it falls into certain categories where advertisers aren't really willing to splurge on advertising, it might be monetized in reality, but demonetized in behind closed doors type thing. So, but no, and Nate, anyone who's been watching my channel for the last little while knows, like, in the last month, I've had 10 or 12 videos that have been flagged, demonetized, straight off upload, and then all approved afterwards. It's just,
and I don't know, and it's not like you're even saying anything bad in those videos. Like, I honestly, I don't know why they demonetize your videos. It's like unbelievable.
It's strictly subject matter. It has nothing to do with the content. It's just an automatic default, and it takes a day before it gets remonetized. But I have a fear that by that point, YouTube has not been recommending it as much as it could have. But whatever, I asked for it, but whatever. One day, it's still. I'm not going to change. It's just I'm not going to change. But it's what it is. What it is. And Nate, apparently, hold on. First of all, I have to go. Congrats to Brody, new 1,000 subs. Yeah. This is the other one I was going to say. Just saw Nate's channel reach 1,000 subscribers. Oh, yeah. And now that I can scroll all the way back to the beginning, I want to thank Dar Fisher for the super chat. Hey, Viva, excellent work. Keep it up. Thank you. Yeah, this is a cool function. This is on StreamYard.
Awesome.
It's not actually on. Now, how do I do this? Okay, there we go. So that's the news with the fine. That's very interesting. Massive fine. I mean, unbelievable. And do we not get suspicious that YouTube can pay this and sort of, without batting an eye, or do you think this stings a little bit?
No, I think this. Come on, this is nothing for YouTube, because don't forget it's the Google conglomerate. So they're making money hand over fist. They probably threw out a number. They said, "Well, give us your best number." They probably 170. Okay, we'll pay it. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
and that's when the FTC says, "Damn, we should have asked for 270."
We could have got more. No, because YouTube, if you read the complaint, YouTube was busted. They were busted. Like they had their hands deep in the cookie jar. And they had been doing this from 2013 after the rule. Now, I don't know if you want me just to go over, like here in the United States, we have
and I'm actually going to try to find the link to the complaint, and I'll put it up there while you're talking.
It's funny because in the United States, we have 3 sources of law. Like each one of our branches of government for the federal system has its own particular law. Like they make their own laws. For instance, the legislature, they pass statutes, and the court, they have case law. But the executive have what we call the regulations, and we call that the administrative law. So this rule that we're talking about, the FTC, this is actually from the executive branch, and what they do is you have a group of people, of experts. They come up and say, okay, this is a good rule that we're going to have so everybody has to follow. And what they do is they'll put that rule up, they'll put that rule, and then it goes through a period called notice and comment. So anybody who's affected, or anybody who thinks they're affected, can go to the website and comment on the proposed rule. And they have to keep it open for, I think, 90 days. And you can comment and say, we don't like it, or we like it. And the commission reads through all the comments. And then at the end of it, they vote to whether they're going to pass this rule or not. And that's how we got this rule. So it went through this phase, and this rule is an object of that. So it's not a statute as Congress passed it, but it's actually a regulation passed through administrative law.
It's amazing. And we got Albino Viper here is asking, sorry, that's a comment. It has become a version of television. That's one of my big fears. No, here's the question. Over easy mode, do you think Google and YouTube will get separated in an antitrust lawsuit or complaint?
Well, it all depends. See, I don't know. Because
that was the next big vlog when that happens, because it's either that happens or they get regulated, or willingly sort of I don't know how they willingly submit to some form of regulation, or just ask for the government to come in and do it. But
because YouTube, it's funny because it's not like, all right, like let's say the big monopoly cases, Standard Oil. I'm going back to the 1900s. Standard Oil. Now think about this. At one point, there was only one gas company for all gas. So we're talking about for stoves, for cars. Standard Oil was the only place you can get petroleum from that made diesel engines, everything. I mean, diesel fuel and everything. The government broke them up because it said they have too much power in the market. It was just too. And now most of the gas companies you today are actually offshoots from that particular case back in the 1900s. AT&T with phone service. It was just like, if you wanted to make a call, you had to use AT&T, and that became so important to society. Just imagine that you only had one phone company to use for phone services.
Yeah, but
so is Google in that sphere? I don't know if you could make that argument.
Well, that's it, because you have alternatives. You have Bing, you have Duck. What else do you have? I guess you have Yahoo search. But the question is, even when they break up the oil company, fine. I mean, and that's an interesting example. But then, meanwhile, for whatever the reason, gas prices are all the same at every gas station. So it's nice you break up the monopoly, and then you're not allowed price fixing, and yet somehow it's just the case that gas prices are always the same. So whether or not breaking it up, some people are saying that breaking it up won't do anything. I think the only thing it might do, if they would have to actively be competing against each other, not just competing, working together, in order for there to be a system where the YouTube search results would not be influenced or effectively based on the Google search results, or where what they promote on YouTube has to do with what's trending in Google. So it's not a question just of breaking them up. They actually have to be competing with one another in order for there to be a solution to this problem. Effectively.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that.
That's interesting. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. If we know darn well if there's ever an antitrust lawsuit, we will be all over that, because people are waiting. But the other thing is, if they start implementing the proposals for losing Section 230 immunity, if they put in that legislation, we might see some some progress in terms of what the problem is.
But I still don't see how to, like, I understand the Republicans now when they start giving, in other words, what it seems like is that the right, which I agree with 100%. What they want to do is just put controls, because what YouTube is doing is messed up, and it's messed up on both sides. What they're doing, conservative content, is getting demonetized horribly bad. I'm talking about it's to the point where if you're a conservative, you put something on YouTube, you have to work through the demonetization. But then on the left, if you mention LGBT or Q in your video, then next thing you know, they're going to want to demonetize that too. So it's getting to the point where we're just free. Where does that exemption? Because that exemption is really, I like to call it the free speech exemption, where YouTube has to instill some sort of free speech to get that exemption. But now it's like, to when have they crossed that line? And I'm thinking they're starting to do so now, but somebody's got to bring the lawsuit.
Yeah, well, somebody has to. Who's going to do it? I mean, it's going to be a long one. It'll be a drawn out one, and you have to have a pro bono lawyer or someone looking to do it, not necessarily for a windfall, but rather for the notoriety that comes with finally, taking the screws to YouTube. Yep. Okay, well, it's interesting. We'll see what happens with that. But, that was the other thing about going after the individuals, going after the channels who mislead on the description of the videos.
Yes. Do
we know how they're going to do that? They're going to get the information from YouTube. YouTube is going to be authorized to share that information with the FTC.
No. This is what the FTC said. So the chairman of the FTC said what they're going to do is after January 1st, the FTC is going to then go to YouTube and start looking at all the content, looking at all the channels, and they're going to start binging people like, okay, this channel is for children. We're going to sue them, and then we're going to also sue YouTube. So they're going to sue the creator individually, and the creator, again, is strictly liable, and then they're going to sue YouTube if they can prove that YouTube knew that the creator had child-driven content.
But I guess the question is, how are they going to get the details, the information, the data on the channels themselves? Like, is YouTube going to share that with the FTC, or are they going to require channels to register with the FTC if they deem it to be child-directed content?
No, they're going to look just like they did with this lawsuit. They're just going to go on YouTube and look. That's why they call YouTube the barrel and us the fish. They say, YouTube is the barrel. We're going to go on YouTube and just look at it ourselves. And then, the creators are the fish. So they're going to shoot those fish in that. And YouTube is the big barrel. And they're going to shoot us as fish in the barrel.
But it's not. It's going to be a question. They're going to need to get the details, addresses for service, names of principals. You think they're going to do that? They're going to search for that on their own, or are they going to require YouTube?
Just like when I was a DA, if I wanted to find whose channel this was, I'm hitting Google with a subpoena. Here's the regulation, here's the law. I'm subpoenaing this person. Give me their IP. I used to get IP addresses. You don't know how much you can get from Google and YouTube. Like there was one time we were looking for somebody, and we had like almost no information, but we had like, I think it was either Facebook or some other account. And when we subpoenaed, we got their Google information, but their Google information, they were using their phone. So we got GPS locators for where they had gone. So we knew exactly like where the person was going every day. It was like insane, but it's right there. So all that information is there.
And you know what this means? They just got $170 million to finance their initial their first 4 years of investigations. Subpoenas for everybody. It's gonna be like an Oprah Winfrey show. Subpoena for you. Subpoena for you.
Well, I'm hoping they'll subpoena my channel. I got to go look now on my channel now and take off these videos.
And it's going to. Do we know that it's going to be retroactive or only going forward? Like, is it going to apply to content already out there that's been out there for years?
I don't know. I actually don't know. But again, I would suspect if YouTube has to be in compliance with the law, then even that older content has to be identified with which child related. Because if you have content that's child related that's still getting this type of information, then you're violating the law. So they have to have some type of mechanism to either stop that from happening or to figure out that it's child related content.
Amazing. And then Albino Vapor says, so is the FTC going to put out what is deemed to be child content? I mean, that's going to be the question. That's probably what's going to be the first major defenses of any suit that get out there. Is it's not child content, it's adolescent content. Or I tell you though, my defense would have been that these accounts that are for 13 and under really are the parents' accounts, and that this is not targeting the children; it's targeting the accounts that have that behavioral pattern. But they ought to be governed by the parents, and the parents, in having allowed the channel to be created, deemed consent to that type of advertising. But I guess, but again, that's a good argument, but the counter to that is that it's not based on the account. It's based on the content. So if the content is child-related content, then it doesn't matter who's watching. It doesn't matter if 100 only adults watch it. The fact that
it's geared toward children is the violation of the law. It's a weird little space they have, but they're saying we don't care if no children are watching it. Only thing we care is about whether the content is directed at children or not.
Amazing. Okay, well, we'll see where that goes. Should we get into the next? We'll get into the next subject.
All right. Yeah. The next that went pretty long. I was like, oh boy, I thought that was going to be quick.
I think this is good for anybody who's into that realm on YouTube. It's interesting. I read the complaint this morning because you sent me the link. Yeah, I know what I would have raised as defenses, but then I guess there's no legit. I mean, there's no ultimate defense. It's just going to be a question of getting rid of it for a price that's fair. But it's the changes that everybody should really know about, and if they can go check out Darley's video. Let's do it.
Oh yeah.
Give me 1 second. I got to take care of one thing with the dog.
The dog is still acting up, huh?
They're so the one that has compromised mobility can't seem to get something, but we'll get it later. Okay, this is what I think everybody, most people are flabbergasted about and requires nuanced and specified explanation because. I didn't understand it. I understand it much better now. I spent the last few days reading on it. Kate Steinle. I'm gonna forget the name of the accused. The perpetrator. Scot-free, walking. No, nothing. No conviction. No nothing. Okay. I mean, actually, before we do that, and for everybody who's watching, by way of Y or N. Because this is my question as to the reporting of the media. How many people knew about that the bullet ricocheted off the pavement before striking Kate? That's the one thing that I had been following the story from the beginning. I didn't follow the trial. It was only this week that I had heard for the first time that the bullet ricocheted off the pavement, which really changed my way of viewing this. And we're going to see by way of Y and N's who knew. It was proven at trial, and we'll get into the rest of it later. It was proven at trial and agreed to by prosecution and defense that the bullet ricocheted off the pavement 12 feet in front of the perpetrator and struck Kate Steinle 72 feet later down the pier. And when I heard that, it's not that everything made sense. It's just that everything made a little more sense than what I thought I had understood previously. So, Nate, starting from the beginning. And Albino Viper says bad aim, and we'll get there because the prosecution did raise a question as to what people who are not accustomed to firing a gun do when they pull the trigger. They accidentally point down, or it pulls down. Starting from the beginning, what were the charges?
All right,
give us the situation and the charges. I think most people should need to know that right away.
All right, situation is that we have undocumented immigrant who is supposedly on a pier. There's a gun. The gun fires, it ricochets off the concrete and shoots Kate Steinle in the back. She falls and she dies because it clips at her aorta. She dies, and then about an hour later, they catch Jose. Let me see the last name. His name it starts with a Z. Just let me pull it. Jose Zarate. So that's initially what happened. So he's an undocumented immigrant, and let me pull up his record which is crazy. He has 7 felony. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say 5 times deported from what I understood,
and 7 felony convictions, and he was on probation and from a felony conviction in Texas right now. So this guy was he was a very, very bad man. So what happens is that obviously the political aspect was why was he what happens is that he was held on like a marijuana violation before, and when they arrested him, they didn't notify the immigration service that they had someone who had been deported 5 times, here, and they could have given him over to immigration, and then they would have kicked him out the country again. In San Francisco, or where this had actually happened, I'm not sure if it's San Francisco, but where this actually happened, that they are what they call a sanctuary state. Now, what happens is that in the United States, there's a difference between the federal government and the state government in terms of if you're a state, like when I was a cop, I was a cop, and there are certain laws that the city said we want you to enforce, and we don't want you to enforce federal law. So we don't want you to enforce immigration law. So we don't want you to ask anybody if they're, here legally or anything. We just want you to enforce state law and city law. So the federal government, now what happens is the federal government, they would send us stuff saying, okay, this guy is immigrant, so we want you to hold him because he's he's undocumented and we want to deport him. We didn't have to do that because we're state. We just have to abide by state law. So San Francisco is one of those cities in which they say we're not going to assist the federal government in enforcing federal law, and they have the right based on the U.S. Constitution. The 10th Amendment gives them the right. It's called the anti-commandeering, where the federal government can't force state officials to enforce federal law. Now, they can do it if they want to. Some states do it, but they can't do it. Go ahead.
If I can pause you there, because I can understand how they've been applying this to the immigration question. But if they say that you can't force California to enforce federal law, I mean, does that not mean to say that they can't force them to enforce, say, murder? They can't enforce the prohibition on murder because it's a federal crime?
No, because it's illegal. It's illegal under state law. See, the state, like, for instance, murder and all that stuff, those are police powers of the state. The states will prosecute you under state crimes. But also the state can enforce federal law. Like, the state can say, well, for instance, for murder, we want you guys to enforce the murder. If there's a federal, murder is just the state statute. But hypothetically, if there was a federal murder statute, then the state can say, well, we're going to enforce that federal. So they can pick and choose which ones they enforce and which ones they don't enforce. Okay.
And now that's sort of the federal law question came up in a recent dismissal of PragerU's lawsuit, where the state court said we're not enforcing federal law, but if you have a state claim, go ahead and make it.
Exactly.
Okay, so the issue is that the Zarate should never have been there because the state he had got caught on the marijuana violation and could have been deported. But since the state didn't report him to the Immigration Naturalization Service, or for this, we don't enforce federal law, then he was released, and yada yada yada. This particular thing happened. Okay, I mean, and that's the political backdrop of the story, which is the question as to why we have sanctuary cities, the legitimacy of sanctuary cities, why states don't enforce federal immigration laws. And then this happens, which colors the entire process, where now, it's not a I would say like a straight up situation. Now there's a political backdrop to this.
Yes.
So someone had asked, do we know where the gun came from in this case? Now, I know it just because I've been looking into it, but apparently it was stolen from a BLM. In this situation is a totally different BLM than what we're typically used to, right?
Well, it was a cop. It was I hope I'm not misremembering, but it was a cop who had his gun in the front seat. He went out to dinner and he comes back to the car and he sees the window smashed in and the gun is gone.
I just remember the acronym for what this police officer was. He was a ranger or something, but it was BLM, which I got confused with because of what BLM as the acronym typically stands for. And apparently he had stored it in the back of his seat when he went out for dinner, where there's a high rate of break-ins. And apparently, and we'll get into this because it's critical later on, it was a Glock and it was double cocked or something.
He said that what he did. Now, for you gun nuts, and it's when you have the hammer back, that single action, meaning it's easier to pull a trigger, versus double action where the hammer is up, and when you pull the trigger, the hammer comes back and then pushes forward. So one, the hammer's already back, and you pull the trigger, it goes forward. The second, you pull the trigger, and the hammer has to come back and then push forward. That's double action.
And it was a semi-automatic pistol. I know nothing about these things, but it was a semi-automatic.
9mm, yeah.
BLM is for Bureau of Land Management. Okay, thank you. In this context, so apparently the gun was stolen a few days prior within the vicinity of the pier. Zarate's defense was that he found it under a park bench on the pier, wrapped in a cloth or a shirt, and that it went off accidentally
while he was picking it up.
And then he panicked, threw it in the water, ran off, and then got caught.
Yes.
Okay, and so the charges were, what were the charges?
All right, so he has so now, so everybody understands, he's going to go on trial in January for a federal gun possession charge because he's a felon and was in possession of the gun. So in January, he's going to go on trial for that federal gun charge. So he's still, he's still in custody dealing with that. But the state charged him with first-degree murder, which he's acquitted, second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, assault with the semi-automatic firearm, and possession of a firearm by a felon. And for the first 4 charges, he was acquitted. And for the last one, it was reversed on appeal.
Give me 1 second. Someone says the dog in the background is distracting. Hold on.
I'm hoping my Dolphins are winning. I'm a Dolphin fan, so yeah, it's been that type of year for me.
Sorry about that. I didn't know if anybody could hear that. Okay. Okay. So so those are the charges. There was one thing that we thought that we should have mentioned beforehand that stolen we got to. Okay. So the defense is that he finds it, and those are the charges that are brought. Acquitted on all charges.
And the last one was reversed on appeal.
And the last one was being in possession of a firearm. That was reversed on appeal.
Yes. And
we'll get into it. It had to do with the instructions that the judge gave the jury. Okay. So going charge by charge, first degree murder, what has to be proven? I mean, I think we all know roughly, but what has to be proven?
Well, really the actus reus for all those murder charges are the same. You had to have killed somebody. So that's the act that had to happen. But for first degree murder, you're looking at premeditation. You're looking at some type of planning. Now, one thing with premeditation, with premeditation, some people think that you have to kind of do it for days, but it could happen in an instant. You could see somebody you can hate, you could sit there and say, I want to kill this person. Let me take out my gun and kill. And then they could charge you with premeditated murder. Those are harder to prove, but first degree murder is planning. You intend to kill them, and that's the highest one. And usually, I think California still has the death penalty. You can get the death penalty for that. Second degree murder, it's intentional and reckless. Meaning, if I put a blindfold on, take out a gun, and just start shooting blindly in the street, that's second degree murder. I'm shooting my gun off recklessly. If somebody gets killed, then that's second degree. And then the voluntary manslaughter is just the negligence. That means I picked up the gun and I was handling it in a negligent manner. Maybe I had it loaded and single action where it's easier to fire, and I'm pointing it and the gun goes off by accident, and I was negligent. And that negligence led to somebody being killed. So those are the three things that he was charged with. And obviously the premeditation they couldn't prove, but it was really between the reckless second degree murder and the involuntary manslaughter.
And okay, this is the one question that I had. I spent a long time looking for an answer, and if anybody knows, this is what I need to know is. So we know the ricocheting off the pavement. We understand was proven. The question was. He says he found it wrapped up in a cloth, and what I don't know, and I wasn't there during the evidence and didn't hear, was the gun in his hand unwrapped when it went off, or did it go off apparently when it was still wrapped in a shirt or a cloth? And would there have been a hole through the cloth that would substantiate the idea that he didn't even know he was holding a gun until it popped off?
Well, I don't know. That's a very interesting question, and I was looking for the pleadings, but I didn't see it. I'm not sure. I know from what I can tell, the jury was convinced. The jury was convinced that, number one, he didn't bring the gun to the scene because the prosecution was saying, well, they were trying to link the fact that he actually stole the gun. And by him stealing the gun, he brought it to the scene. And this all happened because he brought a gun to the scene. That would give you your, at worst, involuntary manslaughter. But the jury seems to be convinced that he found the gun there on the scene. And while he was picking it up, boom, it fired, ricocheting and killing this woman. So if that was the case, if he found the gun there at the scene and just picked it up and it went off and ricocheted, then you have a tragic accident and there's really no criminal liability to this guy.
And so that was the issue. I didn't see the CCTV footage, but apparently there was footage. Sam says it was supposedly wrapped in a towel. Sam Everyman. Yes. This is the question where, for anybody who would know this question, I mean, this would be very important for me in just terms of understanding what level of culpability to impute to this. If it was covered when it went off, fine. And then the question would be, if he unwrapped it and saw what it was, and then it went off in his hands, what level there? Because then we're getting into the secondary charges of negligence. And possession. Actually, that was the other one. Okay, we'll see if anybody has an answer to that question. If anybody followed this. What evidence was adduced. So, I mean, now the burden of proof, everybody knows, is beyond a reasonable doubt. But I was reading an interesting summary of the trial where it says, most people think that the defense has to prove that it was an accident.
No, not at all. It's the government that has to prove it wasn't an accident, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. And from what I understood, they had experts who agreed that the bullet ricocheted. The prosecution's argument was that's the accident that novice shooters make when they shoot a gun, is by pulling the trigger, it points down and then ricocheted. But it was a direct line was one of the bits that the prosecution was trying to prove. And I really read up a lot on this in the last week, but apparently the defense got the prosecution's expert to admit that once it ricochets off the pavement, you can't determine a linear angle. So you can't determine if it went straight forward or actually, veered off to a certain degree, such that it wasn't pointing where it struck at the end.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that admission that gets you out of first degree murder, because I think first degree murder they just were just shooting for the wind with right there, and it really puts you in that recklessness, because that's what this case came down to. Was it reckless homicide, or was this really just negligent homicide? And I think the battle was about this negligence. Was he negligent in bringing the gun to the scene, or was it a tragic accident? And it seems like the jury was convinced by whatever evidence they had that this was a tragic accident. They had to be convinced of two things. If the government was able to show that he stole the gun, like maybe there was a fingerprint or something on the car, something of his fingerprint, then you automatically got your involuntary manslaughter, because now it's negligence. He brought the gun to the scene. You got it. But if you can't show that he was the one that stole it, which the government couldn't show, then you have this issue of, well, did he just really find it? Because that's what it is. You're trying to get the jury convinced that he didn't find the gun. He brought it there.
I'm highlighting Hogtie Champ's comment because this incident, so Nate Broady, none of my Glocks just go off when handled, even when armed, side pulled. There are safety togs on the grip and trigger. Knowing nothing except for what I've read, apparently I say the experts, it was sort of agreed evidence that it was in a state where you wouldn't have to pull the trigger to cause a discharge, and where any sort of reasonable shock could have caused the discharge. I mean, for people people like myself who have no idea of the mechanisms, you rely on what evidence was adduced. But that was apparently the explanation given to that particular question, that it was in this state where direct pressure to the trigger did not have to be applied in order for an accidental discharge.
Well, also too, I've been when you go to the shooting range, it happens all the time where somebody will pick up a gun and it goes off, and because sometimes they'll pick it up on the handle, but maybe they can pick it up and hold the trigger, and it goes off. So it does happen, especially if it's a single action, because when you pick up the gun and you pick up by the handle, sometimes people and I've seen it happen before with pow. You're like, what the hell happened? I picked up the gun and I made a mistake and hit the trigger. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility. And I think it was a convincing enough argument where the defense was able to convince 12 jurors under this climate that this was just a tragic accident and not criminal.
So, I mean, that's where that much I could understand. I understand. It's like, I wouldn't want to be a member of that jury, but that much I could understand as for the first two charges, and the ricochet alone could, cause a reasonable doubt where you're no longer certain beyond a reasonable doubt that it was, premeditated, deliberate, that was what he intended to do. But when you get into the reckless discharge of a firearm and not knowing the evidence, I mean, that to me, if anybody picks up a weapon that they see on the ground unwrapped and they know it's a weapon and they're holding it and it goes off and that the same thing happens, then I have difficulty understanding the outcome. So if you're familiar with this now, there was the issue of what being in possession of a stolen, not a stolen firearm, but what being in possession of an firearm causing injury is. So what was that discussion that's going on in law about possession?
What happens is that on appeal, the court, he was convicted of possession of a firearm with a felon in possession of a firearm. Now, what happens is that that the jury was conflicted and was like, well, how long do you have to be in possession? Because and that shows you that the jury didn't believe he brought the gun to the scene. They believed he found the gun at the scene. So they said, well, how long do you have to be in possession to actually have violated this law? Because if you're a felon, you pick up a gun on the floor, you find something on the floor, you pick it up and you just find out it's a gun, you're in possession for it for 1 second. Are you now in violation of the law just because you picked it up? It's a strict liability. So the judge was kind of considering it is strict liability if you find that he was in possession of the gun and he's a felon and you got to convict him. So that's what happened. But on appeal, the appellate court said, well, no, hold on. It's a little more nuanced than that. And just because he was in possession, the instructions were wrong in that sense. And in terms of you'd have to recharge him on this crime, because that's an issue of fact the jury would have to decide, not a strict liability just because he was in possession of a gun. It's something that the jury would have to determine that he was in possession of the gun with this intent to possess it, not just some accidental possession.
Okay, and now explaining that to people who are not familiar with the law, who might find this to be part and parcel of another travesty, overturned meaning they reversed the conviction. but no retrial on that particular charge. Like just
they could retry him on that particular charge, but I don't know if the state's going to go because they've been embarrassed. This was an embarrassing loss for them, so I don't know if they want to go back. And plus, don't forget, you have the feds that now are going after him too. The feds, it's a little easier to get the conviction in the federal court, and you got a lot more. It's a lot more leeway. So we'll see. But I think the feds are going to get him for the possession of a firearm, and they're going to deport him too. So he's going to spend some time in prison. He's going to probably be deported too. So
Sam Everyman says, then it was double fed with the slide on the primer. This is not a language that I understand.
I am not sure.
Okay. I mean, so this is the tough thing that I think, it was sort of like the similar outcome in OJ where people have such a strong, initial reaction. And then maybe it's not the same thing as OJ to a great degree, but people don't necessarily appreciate that in criminal law, the threshold is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes.
And the defense doesn't have to prove innocence. The defense doesn't have to prove that it was an accident. The defense just has to force the prosecution to prove the essential elements of these charges. And on the premeditated, when do you know when they determined that the bullet was a ricochet? Was it during the trial or was it before it went to trial? Like that's the evidence the prosecution had.
When I read, I believe they found that out before they went to trial. Like when they went back, from when I was reading, it said that they had found that out before trial, and then all the experts agreed the bullet actually ricocheted. And when I think you got when the ricochet occurred, I think that just blew a hole into any first degree murder, and a lot of times it'll blow a hole into the second degree murder because this case. The real crux of this case wasn't about the actress Reyes, her actually being killed. It was about the mens rea, his mental state. And his mental, was it premeditated? Was it intentional? Was it reckless? Was it negligent? And the jury said none of those things applied. It was just a tragic accident. Now, I personally don't agree. I think he should have. I think I would have convicted him on negligence based on what I've been seeing. But the jury, they were there, they saw all the evidence. I didn't see the evidence. So I think I feel bad because I believe it's a travesty of justice, but I can't really say that because I wasn't there in a jury box. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing where I think most people could get nuanced information to not change their opinions, but say, okay, the first degree might have been an impossible charge to prove from the beginning, but the reckless discharge, even if in my mind, if the person saw that they were holding a weapon at any point. Then it's a travesty of justice. If it was wrapped and went off in the wrapping, I imagine there would have to be evidence of a cloth or a t-shirt with a hole in it from where the bullet came out. Then you could sort of have a reasonable doubt as to whether when the person picked up this thing under a bench, why they would ever do that in the first place, not knowing it was a weapon. Yeah, then I mean, it's like this is like something that's you couldn't write in a movie, then people would believe, but it happened.
What you just said about, because if you're to be a reasonable person, you got a homeless guy who's who's an undocumented immigrant, and he's walking around a park and sees something under a bench that looks like it may be valuable. Is he going to pick it up? And I think that's, if you just put that together, you'll say, okay, it's more likely that he's going to pick that thing up. Now, what happens after is what we're talking about. So it's difficult because if it was me or you, I think, yes, that'd be true. I'm not picking up a towel I see on the floor. I might say, hey, somebody left the towel there. But I think in his circumstance, it's more likely than not that he did. And I think his lawyers did a great job of putting the jury in his shoes and saying, what would someone in his position do? They're likely to pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, that's the case. So now it was dismissed on the charges, but found guilty on the illegal in possession of a firearm. That was overturned, and now pretty much everything is done. There's no retrying for the initial charges. There could be re-prosecution for the charge that was reversed. But, well, that's if anybody has any questions that we didn't answer. I mean, there's a lot of discussion I note from people who seem to know more about guns than I do about the pounds that it requires to pull a trigger on this type of thing. But I mean it's. Yeah, difficult to understand the decision, the outcome. But when you have more information, it's certainly some aspects of it become more understandable than others.
let's also forget he's still on trial. Well, he still has the immigration thing that he has to get to, because they're definitely going to deport him like ASAP as soon as they get to, and he still has the federal charges that he has to deal with. So it's not over for this guy. There may be some justice yet to come of this, but as at this point, and don't forget also the family, Kate Steinle's family sued the state for this sanctuary city law, because they were saying, but for the fact that they didn't report this guy to immigration was the fact that he was out in the street and he was able to do this, but they lost that. They lost the court they threw that charge out. So
and do we know why they threw that charge out? Is that like a actus novus or intervening act, or there's no causal relation between the laws and the criminal act?
Well, one thing is that here there's a principle in which if you can't sue the government to do something, like, because of we call it the scarce resources argument. The government's always going to say we have scarce resources, so we can't do everything. And the fact that the state of California was exercising its constitutional right and not enforcing immigration law. So, it's like you can't sue the state of California for having its for exercising its constitutional right not to enforce federal law.
But you can. The family can now sue BLM, Bureau of Land Management, for
them being negligent. Yeah,
and she can sue them. She'll sue them civilly, and
we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, but then you have in law. I mean, we discussed the intervening drink in the DUI, but you have like these intervening acts where you're going to sue for negligence, but it's not because the gun got stolen that we had a chain of events that led to this, that they're going to be held civilly liable. But
that's a big chain, because you got the chain of the person who stole it to leaving it under the bench. I don't think you're going to be able to get it. It's too many circumstances in between the act and the crime that you can really link up. It'll just be too much.
In Canada, I know that there are laws. There are immediate penalties if a stolen firearm is used in a weapon. In a crime. But I think it's if the owner doesn't report it as being stolen. Do you know what the laws are on that in the States?
I'm not sure, because each state is different. I know here you definitely have to report if you lose your firearm. It's because they have to be licensed and everything. So you definitely have to report it. But I'm not sure how it is in California. But I think this officer did report it, because I know as an officer, if you lose your gun and you don't report it and that's used in a crime, then you're it's tough. It's tough life to live.
Yeah, and that's what happened. I mean, that is. And the bottom line is, even a conviction would not have righted any wrong in this story, and it wouldn't have made it any less tragic. It's just now that there's this anger and there's this frustration that has not been, at the very least, even addressed on a judgment.
But you know what though, I have an immigration lawyer, because we were arguing about this case, and I was telling him how I felt that this was just a tragedy of justice, and he asked me to do something. He said, "Well, Nate, let's take the whole immigration situation out of it. Let's say this was just a guy with his family, and he goes and he sits there, he goes by a park bench and he sees something wrapped up. He picks it up and finds it to be a gun, and the gun goes off. Do you think that person should be convicted?" And I said, well, not really, but he said, but understand, that is what the trial court was trying to do. They're trying to eliminate all that, immigration, because that was irrelevant to the facts that what actually happened. Is that you had some guy pick something up that happened to be a gun, and the gun went off and accidentally killed somebody. So, is that criminal? No. But I think when you add everything to it, then it colors it to a little different story. Yeah.
And incidentally, actually, now it's a good point to bring up that in law, the priors, the fact that the person was, not here legally, all of that proof of character is not admissible in criminal law in the States any more than it is in Canada, barring certain exceptional circumstances.
Yes, correct.
Okay, well, if anybody has any more questions on this, I hope we answered some of the questions that people might have had, and at least sensitized them to the details of the trial. I have a feeling most people are not going to be convinced one way or the other. Like people are going to have their feelings on this regardless. But those are at least the facts of what happened at trial.
And we can both agree. Number one, this guy shouldn't have been in the U.S. at all, right? Number two, that stupid sanctuary city law where they're not reporting a 7-time felon, 5-time deported guy to the to the immigration authorities is ridiculous. Like, San Francisco should be ashamed of themselves in this case, because this was something I honestly think could have been prevented if cooler heads would have prevailed and people just did the smart thing. But at this point, but now it's kind of like you have this poor woman who's dead, and it's really because of the policies of this city. I think it's unavoidable, but I do understand why he was acquitted. But I think the city has to really maybe think about their policies more, because I don't think you want to protect a 7-time felon who's been deported 5 times. That's not.
But that's the irony about like how politicized everything has gotten in the States, where without getting too much into it, but certain things now are no longer. It's no longer about the law, but it's about defiance to defiance based on political partisanship, which. And the lowly citizens are always the ones who bear the brunt of this.
Kate Steinle out with her father, and now the father's got there's like when I saw the story the first time, I was like, as a father myself, I'm like, my God, this is horrible. And to know that this guy was just arrested, it breaks your heart. It really does. But what can you do? The people in the great state of California and San Francisco think differently, and it is what it is.
All right. Well, let's. That was. I hope everyone. I mean, I hope people understand it better now, and we'll. I don't know what else. When we were emailing back and forth, now you guys have been seeing our prime minister in your news a lot these days.
Yes.
Do you mind talking about it? We didn't announce it, but hold on one second here. Sorry, Spartan Chuckles says. Thing is, same thing could have happened with a USA-born person. I mean, that was what I said earlier. Yeah, that's what they and yeah, it's just that when it doesn't, and it's the nature of these types of things. You look for answers. You look for blame, and it could have, but it wasn't. And as a result of it not being, it turned into a hotly political issue, above and beyond all of the basics of law, of criminal trials and first-degree murder charges.
But I do want to speak to that question, because yes, it could have happened if he was just a U.S. citizen. Agreed, but this wouldn't have happened if the officials took a 7-time felon who was deported 5 times and just made a quick phone call. Hey, listen, the guy that you deported 5, the guy who's on probation in Texas, this guy, please come get him, because he, his time has run out. They let him back on the street. That's the travesty in this case.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Prime Minister Trudeau. Now everyone's been seeing him in the States. Nate, do you mind talking about this? Because I have some questions. I have it. I need to know what Americans think of this. And not that you're speaking for all Americans.
That's right.
Okay, so you know the story in and out like the rest of us do over in Canada.
Yeah. I know the story about the brown face. They don't call it black face; it's brown face for
Trudeau. So okay, so there's 2 things. First of all, I mean, we obviously come from different places. We have different life experiences. When you see, let's just like right off the bat, you see, forget that it's Trudeau. When you see someone dressing up for Halloween or a themed party like that, do you find it fundamentally offensive as a person? Do you find it at all offensive?
Absolutely not. I may be just not the typical. And to be honest with you, I live in a hood. I live in a hood. And nobody who I talk to ever find it offensive. My mom is. Well, she's actually really conservative too, but she doesn't find it offensive, because what happens is that I think we're at this point in our society, this cancel culture, where things are changing so fast that things that you did 2 years ago, if somebody found out, the next thing you know, they're trying to destroy your whole career. Now, this was 10, 20 years ago.
2001. Now, yeah, we'll get there. It was in 2001, nearly 20 years ago.
And think about this. And the thing that bothers me about this, and I think your video was so spot on, and me and my wife were arguing about it. But I think the point that was made was that you have a drama teacher dressing up for his students to go to a party, and he went all out. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, wow, this is great. And 20 years later, somebody's going to say, well, it was wrong to do that 20 years ago. Like, really? Are we at that point in time?
I think that, like I said in the video also, I think the thing is not necessarily that anybody really thinks it was genuinely wrong, although apparently from like the liberal circles that I've had some talks with, they say even in 2001, it was a sensitive topic, like you didn't do it, but it's not necessarily that people find that offensive. It's rather how he and others have weaponized this type of thing on others. And then when they get caught with their hands in the cookie jar, they're like, context matters for me, but not for thee. But now, so there's the thing. Like, people are calling it brown face and they're calling it blackface, the term, historically, and I looked into this as well, it means to me, it seems like there should be a distinction between what is traditional brownface, blackface, which was done specifically to mock an entire race, as opposed to dressing up like a specific individual, which is not based on mockery, but which is actually based on some form of adoration or some form of respect, like
flattery.
But flattery, like, because and I can think of examples like dressing up to mock the Jewish community is one thing, but then someone who wants to dress up like Albert Einstein is going to have to put on certain features where no one should reasonably take it as a stereotype mockery, but rather one of flattery. And so he's dressing up like Aladdin. I don't know if you saw the Amazing Lucas's video on this, but he had a funny take where he said, like, I don't know what version of Aladdin he grew up watching, but Aladdin didn't go quite that, that hardcore. But no, like I and maybe it's just my perspective, and I don't know if it is, but seems to me there should be a distinction between what is traditional mockery at the expense of versus wanting to dress up like someone specific and someone who you like, or someone who you have a reason for wanting to dress up like.
When I grew up in the 80s, everybody wanted to be Michael Jackson. And when I remember when I was in Florida, and all the kids who liked Michael Jackson, the ones that happened to be Caucasian or Hispanic, they put blackface on, they put a fake Jerry curl on, and they were Michael Jackson. Now today, if somebody finds tapes of those people running around being, doing a moonwalk, having fun as Michael Jackson, they're going to say that they weren't racist. And I think that's the point that we're missing. Right now, we've turned, and this go back to the law, we've turned everything to strict liability. He put on blackface, he's strictly liable as a racist. No, he didn't have, there's no way this man had any intent, back then to offend people. And I'll also say this. You remember the movie Soul Man? I think Joe Rogan talked about it. Soul Man. The whole movie was about people going around in blackface. It was a kind of a take on this whole thing. There was no outrage. It was around that same time too, and it wasn't a great movie, but it showed the kind of the time. There was no outrage about that. Remember Ted Danson? There was like a little thing about Ted Danson. Remember when he did the blackface?
That's one of the examples that people were bringing up, is that when Ted Danson did it, he did take flack for it, so people should have known as of late 90s.
But you know who told him to do that? His black girlfriend, Whoopi Goldberg. She told him to put the black face on. Is she the racist now? It's like, at a point, we got to get to the point where, we understand people did things that today we see in a different light. But when they did it, I don't think Ted Danson, who's dating Whoopi Goldberg, who I don't think I would be dating, but who's dating Whoopi Goldberg, is putting on blackface because he's a racist. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
No, that's the thing. And the history of blackface was specifically to mock, to demean, to degrade, to demean an entire race. When I read an article, I mean, someone might remember it, but a girl dressed up like Doc McStuffins for Halloween. A white girl, and then she darkened her skin to look like Doc McStuffins, and there was social media flack. There was the kid who dressed up like a soccer player. With the costume was it looked like the person that she was trying to look like, not just a generic person, a specific person who she loved, and there was flack. The only good thing that seems to be coming of this is that it seems that most people are not enraged about the actual act itself. Most people are just enraged about how there's this fundamental hypocrisy that had it been, I don't know if you know our conservative guys here, if it had been Andrew Scheer or had it been Maxime Bernier who had been caught with this, sure as sugar what Trudeau was. Yeah, like, but now, so but it just seems like reading the comments, everyone's like, yeah, one of our leaders, I think who was it? Maxime Bernier, who's running, says, I'm not going to call him a racist. I don't think he's a racist, but he's the biggest hypocrite in the country because Lord knows what he would have called anyone else.
Playing those identity politics. He's playing those identity politics, and now he got caught with the identity politics.
When did Tropic Thunder come out? That was early 2000s, right?
Yeah. Robert Daly took a little flack for it, but it wasn't really that big. Matter of fact, you know what? Somebody sent me, because I was arguing with someone else about this. Actually, we weren't arguing, we were talking about it. And they sent me Eddie Murphy, Saturday Night Live. He did a whole skit in whiteface where he was saying that he dressed up in whiteface and was going around, it was a play on.
Oh yeah, I know. He dressed up like an old white man to see what life was like as a white person. I remember
no outrage. So and that's what I'm saying. If we you can't have this selective outrage. White people can't dress like, but black people can dress. It's like at a point where are we going with this? You know what I'm saying? Are we really going to be that hypocritical where we're going to tell one section of the society, you can't do this, but it's okay for everybody else to do it? No, that itself is unfair.
It goes back to the argument, which a lot of people don't agree, but the argument is that it's not racist. It doesn't carry the same social implication when a black person does it dressing up in whiteface, because the history is not there. And I know a lot of people don't buy the argument that is the argument, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, and incidentally, it's like Eddie Murphy in Coming to America and Arsenio Hall. They were the old Jewish guy in The Barber, the old, and S2 Turbines says white chicks for sure, and nobody.
Oh my God!
Let me see this. Yeah, so I mean, it's just the thing is it's the hypocrisy of it. And it's the unwillingness to understand or extend the olive branch when it's your adversary, but then all of a sudden when it's you, then it's I don't know if you saw Justin's apology. The apology to me was an interesting thing also, because I don't understand how someone apologizes for something they did on purpose that they didn't think was wrong when they did it, and now he says, yeah, 20 years later, now I recognize that it was racist. I'd say the racism is a mens rea actus reus crime, and you have to have the act and you have to have the intent. It's not like you say a word, like, there are plenty of words that people don't necessarily know have certain origins, and you're not racist because you said them if you didn't have the intent to be racist when you said them. No, it's good. I was curious. I wanted to know if first of all, it's not that, I don't know, are people laughing at Justin Trudeau in the States the way we think people are laughing at him in the States? we get a Y or an N from the crowd here.
You know what? But from my perspective, like from my perspective, I didn't know. Like I don't know who the liberal guys there. I'm assuming that he was liberal, but I didn't, because after the news reports, like, oh, he's liberal. I was like, okay, well, he's liberal. So you don't really know if you guys have the identity politics up there like we do here. But here, like, we had the governor of Virginia get caught with blackface, and it was the same thing. He's he's a Democrat, blackface. It was a whole scandal. But it's and he was Michael Jackson too. He did the Michael Jackson thing. But I think at this point in time, we're at the point in time where we're trying to destroy people's careers for things that they did decades ago.
Well, it's because it's been weaponized for political purposes. There's no other way about it. No, Trudeau is, for your personal information, he is liberal. I don't know if you saw the clip which was running on Sky News. Everyone who's doing the reporting has found a bunch of clips. He corrected someone who said mankind during a question that she was asking him, and he stopped her and said people kind because it's more inclusive. And then there were some other. I mean, there's some other classic clips where he accused an old French Canadian lady of racism because she was asking him, the same border questions that politicians in the U.S. are asking, because the liberals have a different policy. It's it's the weaponization of these things. My personal feeling is I don't even think they care. No, I don't think they care about the act, and I don't think they care about the underlying actual questions of equality. They just care about politicizing it or weaponizing it for political gain, which is what I think. Again, the regular citizenry of the world are getting fed up seeing. It's like they're exploiting of the children to promote their own politics and to weaponize it against their adversaries without any sort of authenticity behind it, which is why I think everyone's just going nuts over it. But we have our election in 2 months, Nate. We don't have like 2 years like you guys have in the States. So it's a 2-month election campaign, and we'll know who's going to get elected or booted next election. It'll be coming up.
This is going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting because it is interesting. Of our three politicians, Trudeau comes out with this apology. The conservative guy Andrew Scheer comes out and says it was racist. He should have known better. He should have done it. And then you have this other guy, Maxime Bernier, who says, "I'm not calling you racist, but you are a big hypocrite." Which is, as far as responses goes, I think everybody sort of likes the Maxime Bernier response.
Yeah.
But that's it. So let's see. Does anyone have any questions in the question? Let's see if there's any questions we want to take before we wind down. Nate, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think this was fantastic. I want to see if my Dolphins were down 26 or 24 to 6.
Someone said they were down quite a bit the last I saw.
Yeah, they've been getting destroyed every week. It's funny because I went to first week with my Dolphins jersey on and watched them get destroyed like 49-10 or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, I wanted to come home and burn it. So.
Nate, Elon Musk is watching our live stream here. We have made the big leagues, Ben. Yes, it was racist, but it wasn't my racism. It's your racism. The other thing, I'm thinking like no one's ever going to find pictures of me dressed up like Aladdin, but I know that I dressed up like a woman for Halloween, and there was no mockery. It was like, you're dressing up for Halloween. I liked dressing up where I would go to school and it would take everyone a good 3 minutes to realize who I am. That was sort of like the fun part of Halloween, was the disguise.
No, soon they're going to be coming after us. Like I dressed up as a Ninja Turtle. I painted green all on my face. Next thing you know, it's turtle rights. Yeah, like what the hell? I thought it was all right.
Yeah, no, it is. We'll see. We'll see where it's going. I think you don't want the pendulum to come too far back, but you want the pendulum to come to sort of like a reasonable middle ground, which is, intent matters, context does matter, but it matters for everybody and not just for yourself and not for your political adversary.
Yeah, and I think we have to. I think we have to start getting to a point where we have a better understanding of that people make mistakes, and that things that were done in the past, even if they were wrong back then, we have to understand. And especially as a Christian culture, it's supposed to be this whole with forgiveness, and as long as we. Like I don't know if you saw Dave Chappelle's new special.
I saw all of the clips. I cancanceled Netflix, but I should probably get it back. But I've seen enough of it to have heard the best.
And I hate that. And I'm not. I don't want to spoil it. But when he was talking about Kevin Hart, and he was like, Kevin Hart is almost perfect, except for 4. He was 4 tweets away from being perfect. And is that the type of society you really want to live in, where you have to be perfect to have any type of career? It's just not going to happen.
It's not even that. It's the question of what the imperfection is. Like holding stand-up comics to edgy, shocking humor that doesn't age well was never weaponized the way it was. Like I watch Blazing Saddles, The Jerk, Spaceballs. It has a bunch of humor that you probably wouldn't you get away with today, but it should not be disqualifying and it should not be held against them retroactively the same. Like enacting criminal law and applying a penalty retroactively.
Yes.
But it has been weaponized, I think, but people are getting fed up with the way it's been weaponized. And I think that's where people are going with their vote and with their level of tolerance. But forgiveness when someone actually did something wrong, and, but on the other hand, not fabricating a wrong for political gain. That's where I think we're getting into. We need Don Rickles. I mean, I've been listening to, I saw Dave Chappelle, like all of the clips, because Netflix posts them in shorter clips called Netflix is a Joke. I think YouTube then recommended Andrew Schultz to me, who is another comic who pushes the envelope into, deliberately. But that's what stand-up comedy is. It's like, you don't go to a midnight New York comedy club and complain that the humor is dirty.
Oh yeah, it's like what's his name? For everybody from Richard Pryor, who was the guy that talked about religion all the time? Who died? I forget the guy who talked about it now. I can't remember his name. But there was one guy who you couldn't talk about religion, but he started making jokes about religion. This is what comedy is. Comedy is supposed to push the boundaries. Actually, there's an interesting question from Night Wolf in WC. It says, "Can people of the jury ask or submit questions if they do not understand or are unclear about parts of the case as presented?" Yes, the jury, what they'll do is submit a question to the judge when they're deliberating, and that happened on this case. What happens is that during the point of the trial in which they were deliberating about that last charge about felons in possession of a gun, George Carlin, that's true. Felons in possession of a gun. The jury sent the question to the judge, asking the judge whether was there a time limit that had to be satisfied for them to convict the person who shot Kate Steinle of this charge. And the judge responded that yes, there was none. If you believe he was in possession of a firearm and he's a felon, then you have to convict them. And that's what the appeals court overturned. So yes, that jury, and that was a jury instruction that was wrong. They asked him a question and he came back with the wrong answer.
Yeah, and that's called what is it called? Jury clarification, which they can ask a question while they're in deliberation. What are the limitations on the questions that they can ask? They can be instructions, but not questions in law to the judge.
Yeah, there are certain questions, like a question about evidence. There's certain questions that the judge can clarify specific things about the law, but they can't, like, say if the jury says, "Well, do you think he's credible?" or something like that. There's certain things that the jury any questions of fact the jury has to figure out on by their own. But if they have questions of law, is this law, how should we interpret this particular piece of law? Is this qualify for this piece of law? Yes, the judge can answer questions of law because he's the judge of law, but the jury, anything factual that the jury, is this person credible or something like that, that's only in the purview of the jury.
All right, and Tim wants to know, can the statute of limitations be extended?
Yes, and no, I believe, it depends. That's a question of it depends.
Okay. That's very interesting. Okay. I mean, what else? We'll say something. Tim, I just reading Tim's question again. Nate, we'll do this. We have to do this at the very least once a month.
Nate, this is great. This is fantastic because I'm actually going to do a video on this YouTube thing because I think this YouTube thing is just so fascinating, and the Kate Steinle stuff is like amazing. So
the Kate Steinle is one of those decisions where, yeah, I was shocked. I read a little more. I'm still shocked. I can understand some things, and then I disagree with other things. Of course, yeah. The O.J. Simpson one is the classic one that that's where people learned about criminal law, and people don't like what they learned about criminal law. And that's it. The rest of it, there'll always be interesting topics to deal with. And the other thing is, I think the Kate Steinle is I say not controversial, but it's a sensitive one that requires a real-time discussion, and it's not something where you just can. I think it requires interaction with people and with the people who have the questions.
Yeah, and I think something like this, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, but I think now that people know, hey, this was, it was a ricochet. Hey, he could have found the gun. I think now that clarifies it. And when you remove the political piece of it, even though, I think we both agree that the outcome kind of sucks, but I think legally it's more understandable now that you can digest it a little bit easier.
I was just flabbergasted from my own perspective to have learned this week that the bullet ricocheted, because I follow the news and I followed it at the time, and someone posted it in a comment in the community tab. And if you're watching, thank you, because I think I responded to it. But after that, I mean, I can understand the first two charges, but then whether or not the rest I agree or disagree with. This is why I can't stomach criminal law, and this is why I could never do it, and I would never want to be on a jury, because it's like you have to dissociate the human side from the legal side, and I don't know how people do it.
It's funny because one time I was prosecuted. The first person actually sent to jail was a transgendered woman. And so I go, so it shows you, because, I'm in New York, so it's very, very liberal here. It's extremely liberal. So I go into court. I'm the prosecutor, right? So I'm about to send this person to jail. So so we're doing our sentencing. So I'm saying, well, I went 2 months for this person. I went 2 months in jail for this person. So so the person looked like a guy. It was like a 6 foot tall man. So I'm like, the defendant. Then I said, he did this. The judge stops and starts screaming at me. No, does the person identify as a man? So I'm literally on the record screaming at me about misidentifying this person. So then his lawyer starts speaking. He's like, yeah, he doesn't need to. And I said, he just said it. He said him too. He said him too. So like,
I mean, discussions you probably thought you'd never be having with a judge in your life. I mean, it's.
Then the judge calls us both up, escorts us both. You guys got to get it right. This is no, all right. So then from now on, no personal pronouns. The defendant.
That's where everyone. We have the language, compelled language laws in Canada. Jordan Peterson's at the forefront of it. One way you can never go wrong is the gender neutral qualifier: plaintiff, defendant, accused. And if you have a last name, last names are always good. All right, Nate. So let's call. I mean, thank everyone. This was awesome, Nate. We're going to do this. People, let me just put this comment up here. I can't. Please do more monthly. Casey Auto Doctor. Do more of these monthly live streams with Nate. Excellent information is getting shared with everyone. Also, you will never run out of topics to cover.
That's true.
This is
our monthly.
Nate, people have questions, and I'm always reluctant to give answers or even opinions, which is why I like this. The majority of the questions are American law, so we can discuss the principles, and you can provide the clarity.
Oh, but I have to give this one disclaimer: this is not legal advice.
My sign is cut off. None of this is legal advice, people.
Illegal advice. Seek a licensed professional in your area.
In your jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah. None of this is just to help you understand the world in which we live.
Oh my God. Yes.
All right, Nate, go enjoy the rest of the weekend. Everyone, thank you very much. And you'll get notice the next time we do this. All right, Nate, hang on. I'm going to end this broadcast and we'll talk for a bit more after. See you guys later. End broadcast.